All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 189. And today, we're going to start off by saying 9 p.m. Central Time tonight, which is roughly 6 hours from when I'm recording this. I'm doing the next session of my Village of Hamlet Daggerheart playthrough. So twitch.tv slash Zelda, or let's try that again. Twitch.tv slash Trainer Jody. Zelda Universe is the other channel I read stuff for. Come watch. You can interact with the game by using your channel points, which are 100% free, no subscription required. No bits, no nothing. Just show up. You passively earn channel points, and you can redeem them for things like giving the players reroll token or giving me fear, and lots of other stuff. So tune in. That's not what I want to talk about today. Today, I saw something in the news that actually kind of reinforces something I've talked about a couple times on this channel. And so I figured, since I've talked about it in a theoretical aspect, we could see a practical application of it. And what I'm talking about is Brazil. No, not really. So, one of the controversies around the Switch 2 has been in the end user license agreement, the EULA. They have a clause in there that basically says they're allowed to remotely brick your console if you do something that they don't like. Now, it's significantly more complex than that, and it's significantly more legalese stated than that. But that's what most people have been framing it as, is, well, Nintendo can just brick your console for no reason. They actually can't. But it is significantly more restrictive than anything we've ever seen on a console ever. Nintendo, forever, and when I say forever, I mean if we go all the way back to the 90s, when ROMs and emulation first started becoming big, Nintendo was really the only company that not only was fighting against it, but was actively seeking out websites and things like that to shut them down for hosting ROM files, and other things like that. For a long time, obviously, I only know this because I heard it and read about it while doing research for this video, and most definitely have never experienced this personally myself. But from what I have read, back in the day, if you wanted to get a Game Boy Advance emulator, you could download the emulator, but it actually required a particular file in order to operate. I can't remember what the file was called, but none of the sites that offered the emulator would offer that it was a BIOS file. There we go. You had to get a BIOS file separately because the emulator, the software itself, just wouldn't work without a GBA BIOS. And everywhere that you could download, or almost everywhere, there was a few kind of naughty sites you could go on. I've heard that you could get both of them at the same time, but for the most part, anyone that hosted the emulator file, which had, like, emulators in and of themselves had been declared not really legal, but a few companies had fought against them and had failed, as long as the emulator claimed that it was only for archival purposes and things like that. I remember PlayStation tried to sue this company called Bleem because they made a PS1 emulator that would allow you to basically play PS1 games on your computer. But that, and they actually sold that in stores. I actually bought it years and years and years ago. You could buy it at like Best Buy, or even places like Office Max or Office Depot sometimes had them, because the discs themselves are only like $10. and Sony got pissed off that someone was basically selling a $10 PlayStation. So they took Bleem to court and lost because Bleem basically stated that all they were doing was allowing people to use the software that they purchased in a slightly different fashion, but they weren't infringing upon any copyrights. So by the time GBA emulators were getting bigger, that had already been settled. But what hadn't been settled is specific things like the BIOS in the GBA. And so anytime Nintendo found somebody giving out the BIOS file itself, they would cease and desist them and do all these real nasty stuff to them legally. So it's not surprising that Nintendo has been fighting this war against mods and anything that can really manipulate their software in any way, shape, or form. And their newest version is they can effectively remotely brick your Switch 2 if they detect something on there that violates their terms of service or their end user license agreement. And a lot of people are not pleased with this for a number of different reasons. Probably the people that are the loudest are the emulating scene and the modding scene. Things like Metroid Dread Randomizer. I don't personally believe a randomizer should be considered quote unquote illegal or anything like that because it massively changes how the game is played. Now, if you're giving out the base game with the randomizer, yeah, that's piracy. But if all you're doing is allowing the game code to be tweaked to, basically increase the replayability, I don't believe that in and of itself should be considered a violation or something. I think that's transformative enough that it should fall under fair use. And Nintendo tried to fight that years ago with Game Genie, where they're like, well, they're creating. I think their argument back then was they're creating derivative works based on our copywritten work, which is illegal according to copyright law. And courts found no, they're not creating derivative works. You can't use the Game Genie without the original game. You have to actually plug it in to the original game, and once you unplug it or once you stop the session, that version of the game with all the cheats enabled doesn't actually exist anymore. So no, you don't get to claim that. So anyway, the modding the modding scene in particular is really upset about this, and I can completely understand why. Also, the piracy group that thinks that they're totally allowed to steal from Nintendo because they don't like them. They're really pissed off about this too because it adds a lot more difficulty to doing stuff like that. And I'm not particularly sad for them. I'm not a big fan of pirates in general. I think they're assholes. But another group that is really upset about this, other than just like the regular population of what happens if I accidentally do something? What if I accidentally, get bricked? Then I have this, $450 paperweight. That's not fair. But the reseller market is starting to realize what a bad idea this is because a few people already have purchased a used Switch, and because the ban is what Nintendo calls it, because the ban is located on the system itself, and I think it can be tied to a Nintendo account as well. But it bricks the system itself. People have bought secondhand Switch 2s, turned it on, and realized it's a paperweight. And apparently, as of right now, it is unfixable. Like, Nintendo can't reverse it, which is also a really bad thing for people that get mistakenly banned or bricked, because stuff like that has happened too. And again, as far as I have been able to find out based on mostly hysteria, so take this with a grain of salt, once it's bricked, it's bricked. You got to go find yourself a new Switch 2. So a lot of people have been very upset about this. And some people that have been attempting to defend Nintendo, there's not many, have basically been saying, well, all you have to do is don't do sketchy things. Like if you just use the Switch 2 the way it's intended to be used, then you don't have anything to worry about. So one of the reasons that I'm not particularly afraid like something like that might happen to me. I've never modded my original Switch. I didn't do anything to my 3DS until after not only all support for it had ended, but also the 3DS eShop was closed. At that point, I'm like, you know what? I'd like to be able to play like DS games and other stuff on my 3DS because it's easier than using my other like emulators and stuff like that. And things like, oh god, there's a patch for Dawn of Sorrow, which is a phenomenal Castlevania game, but the mechanic for drawing these seals, every time you kill a boss, you have to take the stylus out and draw this little seal, or else the boss regains like 20% of their hit points. You have to kill them again. And if you make a mistake, they get 20% of their hit points back. If you don't do it fast enough, they get it. It was a really annoying mechanic, and I hated it. So they have a modded version of it that takes that out and also does stuff like fixes the luck stat in Dawn of Sorrow, which was glitched to the point where putting anything into luck was basically useless because the change to like drop rates and other thing that luck was supposed to affect was so infinitesimally small that you could max out your luck and it would have like a 0.1% change in what you were doing. And getting any points of luck was really hard. So maxing it out was nearly impossible. So anyway, stuff like that. So why are we talking about this? Well, and why did I say Brazil? Well, Brazil, like most countries, does have consumer rights laws. And somebody has brought a lawsuit against Nintendo of Brazil specifically, claiming that this policy that allows them to basically remotely brick a Switch 2 is a violation of their consumer rights laws. And so they're taking them to court. And the reason that I bring this up, I've mentioned when we were talking about things like the Critical Role license that they use for Daggerheart content and Candela Obscura content, and just how many kind of weird things in there that I'm like, this is a weird thing to have in your open game license, which I think they call it their community game license. But it's a weird thing to have in your license because I'm not sure it's enforceable, and even if it is, it's a dumb thing to try and it's a dumb thing to try and flex on. And I mentioned before, technically, it's not something you have to worry about until someone has sued them for it, and the court has found in Critical Role's favor, and then it's been appealed, and the court has reaffirmed Critical Role's favor. Up until that point, it really doesn't mean anything because it could just as easily be declared unenforceable. It could be declared illegal, violation of various rights, stuff like that. Illegal contracts are signed every day of the week and twice on Sunday. A lot of companies will unintentionally put things in their contracts that violate certain laws or are violation of certain rights that are enshrined in the Constitution or a bunch of different places. And some businesses, some very unethical businesses, will intentionally put illegal things into their contracts. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that having someone sign a contract with either something that's unenforceable or is a violation of their rights doesn't actually cause any problems for the business. If they actually try to act on that, they can get some penalties. But just an employee taking them to court and saying, hey, this isn't right, and the court, especially if it's declared just unenforceable, there's not really a huge downside to the businesses unless they actively violate your rights. But just putting in a clause like perpetual contracts and things like that. They've been declared unenforceable in a few different states in the U.S. I don't know about worldwide, but I know specifically in the U.S. a few different places have declared them unenforceable. There are still contracts with perpetual licenses in them that are being signed today. They're just unenforceable. And so that brings us back to this idea of this Nintendo remotely bricking thing. If, and this is a huge, huge if, because just because a lawsuit is brought up does not mean, first of all, even that the person bringing the lawsuit has any grounds to bring the lawsuit. Second of all, even if they do have grounds, it doesn't mean that they're going to succeed. And third of all, even if they succeed, they may not get what they want. So there are a lot of ifs here. But if we assume it might succeed, just for sake of argument, this is how predatory EULAs and TOSs get changed. Is somebody goes through the process of actually taking it to court and gets a ruling on it, and then the company is forced to change. And this is the only way, with a few rare exceptions, that things like this get changed. Now, if this happens in Brazil, that means, oh, everybody's free. Not at all. As much as some movements right now want you to think that if we can just do it in this one place, then the whole world will change. That's not actually how it works. There are a lot of different ways where something like that can fail, including when there are things in a different country that actually make the process that was illegal in a different country legal here. Look at how food is processed in the U.S. as opposed to literally everywhere else in the world. So theoretically, even if Brazil succeeds on this, it does not mean that around the world Nintendo is not going to be allowed to brick your consoles. And that doesn't mean that, well, then I'll just be able to import something from Brazil. There's nothing really stopping them from region locking all Brazil units to make it completely incompatible with games and software that's sold outside of Brazil. Like, they can do that. That's been found 100% legal many, many times before all over the world. So this is not the, like, oh, Nintendo's going to fall thing that a lot of people are claiming it is. But it is the first step in the possibility of changing it. Even if it's decided in some court, like maybe in the U.S. where corporations tend to have a little bit more power, especially if they spend lots of money, or Japan where corporations are looked upon very, very favorably. Even if it's declared completely legal in those two really, really massive markets, there's still always a chance that Nintendo go, you know what? It's really not worth how much work we have to put into this, because in addition to writing that ability into the code of the Switch 2, they also have to constantly be updating the Switch 2, because people are going to find ways around that. And so they constantly have to not only be updating it to work with all the other updates that they have to put in over the lifetime of the product, but they also have to have a particular team of people whose sole job is to make sure that every time people get around this thing, that they can find a workaround for it. Otherwise, it's mostly useless. So it may get to the point where Nintendo just goes, you know what, this really isn't worth the amount of money we're spending on this. Fun fact, Japanese companies have very different mindsets compared to basically most Western companies, where Western companies are always going to be thinking, for the most part, what's the bottom line? How much is it going to cost me? Do I feel like the investment is worth the amount of work this is going to cost? That's not how a lot of Eastern-based companies, specifically Japan and China specifically, they don't really operate like that. The reputation of the company is significantly more important than the company actually making any money. And this has been shown time and time again. It is so well known that when I took my my first world business course, we had an entire section on Chinese and Japanese um, uh, businesses, and specifically talked about how one of the biggest problems Western companies had negotiating with Chinese and Japanese businesses was they would go in pitching, hey, this can make you a lot of money. And they would get rejected over and over and over and over again. They couldn't figure out why it was they could never get a deal over there. It's because they were talking the wrong language. They were talking money, and these companies wanted to know, well, what will it make it look like? What will it do to our reputation? And if doing business with an American-based company, which their morals and ethics are not looked on very fondly in other countries, so by simply doing business is going to make our company look worse, and that actually affects the value of the company itself. Um, so yeah, it's going to take a lot for Nintendo to get to the point of this really isn't worth it. But this is a first step for that. And again, it's a really good example of it doesn't matter that just by booting up your Switch 2, you agree to that EULA in a legal process. Like sitting there and just clicking OK, from a legal standpoint, is the exact same as signing a contract. And if you can, because they make it that you can't even get into the system without agreeing to that, it's very, very easy for them to prove that you agreed to that because the system is working. So as long as the system is working, somebody had to have agreed to that. And that has been tested in courts around the world over and over again, and it's been affirmed over and over again. So even though people legally agreed, they said, yes, I agree to this by turning on and clicking OK on the EULA, that doesn't mean that the EULA is legal. And all it takes is for someone to find a legal theory as to why this is either unenforceable or actively illegal and actually take them to court. That process is very, very expensive. It's very, very time consuming. Like the average lawsuit takes like months before your first hearing, much less if it actually goes to trial. You're looking at years, depending on exactly what's going on. And then the appeals process can add years more onto it. So there's a good chance that if we have to entirely wait on the courts to deal with this, the Switch 2 might have been replaced by the Switch 3 or whatever their new system is before we get a legal ruling on that. Or it could be fairly quick. It all depends on a lot of different things. But I did find it something interesting and again, something that does kind of illustrate this idea of just because someone had you sign a contract doesn't mean that it's legal. Like I was just watching this thing on, I'm not going to say the dude's name because I don't want to even give him that much recognition, but there's a certain nuisance streamer in South Korea right now that is currently going through some problems. And this other person who claims to be a documentarian or a documentary filmmaker was just bragging on an interview that they did that they basically tricked them into signing a contract that gave this documentary filmmaker all the rights to all of the interviews and everything like that, and made sure that they never had to pay the nuisance streamer or his buddy in South Korea any money because of some cool little legal tricks they put in the contract. Fun fact, that doesn't actually work. That's not how the legal system works, and just because you got them to sign something that you think has a legal loophole that allows you to keep all the money doesn't mean that it's actually legal. And I read about contracts like that, case studies when I was in school. They don't go well. Generally what happens is they go to court. It takes like 5 minutes for the judge to look it over and go, oh, this is obviously a predatory contract. You can't be trusted. You're required to pay them this much. You also have to pay these many fines, and you're not allowed to form a business for this amount of time. You have to close down. Like, this is the stuff that happens. So, yeah, just because someone got you to sign an illegal or an unenforceable contract doesn't actually mean anything. So never assume that just because you signed a bad contract that somehow you're screwed and you've given all your rights away. You actually can't sign your rights away. It's not possible. I used to tell employees that I worked for I was a manager for a video rental place, and this was long after Blockbuster's demise. So, and I had an employee come in, and we got all of our new movies in. And before the employees are allowed to check them out, I have to process all of them into the system, which takes time. And I hadn't had a chance to do it that day because I was the only person working. And so I had an employee come in and go, "Oh, I'll just process the movies because I wanna take these out because they didn't actually we weren't allowed to rent them until the next week." And I said, "No, I can't let you do that. I don't have enough payroll to put you on the clock right now. I'd get in trouble." And the employee goes, "Well, no, I'll do it off the clock. I don't care." I'm like, "I can't do that." "Yes, you can. Just don't put me into the system." I said, "No, literally by law, I cannot allow you to work off the clock. It is 100% illegal." "Yeah, but I'm agreeing to do it." You cannot agree your rights away. According to the Fair Labor Standards Act, you have a right to be paid for any work you do for a for-profit business, which is what this is. There's no contract, there's no statement you can make that will make it legal for me to allow you to work. And it wouldn't be you that was breaking the law, it would be me that is breaking the law. So, no, you can't do that. You are not allowed to sign your rights away. That's the whole point of rights, is they can't go away. There's nothing that will get rid of your rights aside from things like committing a felony will remove some of your rights. Doesn't get rid of all of them, but it does get rid of some of them. Anyway, interested to hear what you guys think. Has anyone been following this lawsuit in Brazil? Or anything like that? And does anyone have any other examples of businesses trying to get you to effectively sign your rights away and having it blow up in their face? Because I have had that happen at two different companies that I worked for. They tried to claim that no, you don't actually have that right because you agreed that you don't. And I'm like, it's not how the law works, but you go ahead and keep thinking that. I'm just going to talk to the Department of Labor, and then I don't even need to hire a lawyer. Their lawyers will talk to you. So have fun with that. Funny enough, both of those companies don't exist anymore. Strange, right? Anyway, it's all for me today. See you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.